So can I actually, first of all, thank you for joining us today. This is a really important session and clearly evidenced by the amount of interest that we had in attending. Can I begin, of course, first of all, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we all gather here today, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. We do have a couple of housekeeping rules that we will start with first. Tamzine, if possible, if you could put that up there, very great, thank you. I know there were a couple of comments that came up in the chat before, but your microphone and your camera has automatically been muted, so you don't need to worry about that today. I will ask, however, because this is going to challenge my skills as facilitator today, I'm quite sure, but I'm going to do the best I can. I've had a good bit of practice now over the past 18 months, but can I please ask that everyone put your questions into the Q&A, not into the chat, because it becomes impossible for me to manage both platforms at the same time, and I don't want to leave anything out. I know you're going to have a lot of questions, so please, again, put your questions into the Q&A box, not into the chat box. And I do want to note as well, I can already see that there's a lot of stuff going into the chat. Can I ask everyone to put everything into the Q&A section so that I don't miss anything? I do need to note as well to everyone today that this session is being recorded because we obviously have quite a number of people who would have loved to have joined us, but had other commitments. So it was a really important issue for them to have the session recorded. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. I also would like to acknowledge and thank our sponsors for today in the Victorian State Government, but in particular, the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions, who we're partnering with in delivering this really critical session to you today. I guess really that, you know, the announcement on Sunday by the Premier that, you know, obviously our roadmap was escalated very quickly as a consequence of the fact that, you know, our vaccination rates have really climbed rapidly. And today it's really fitting that we're doing this session on a day when Victoria has hit the magic threshold of 70.51% to be exact. So it's a very exciting day for all of us to know that we're definitely on the pathway to that 80% and indeed even 90%. But I think what's happened as a consequence of this escalated process, we are also seeing an escalation in the level of anxiety because there's a lot that's happening now that we need to prepare for a lot more quickly than we thought we could or had to. And that has, you know, of course, many of you have contacted us about the stresses and the questions and the challenges that you're confronting. So today, I'm very, very pleased. If you could skip to the next slide, Tamzine, thank you. I'm very pleased today to introduce to you both the project director and project manager of the Vaccinated Economy Regional Trials that will step us through basically the experiences of what has happened through the trials, the purpose, the technology platform that's been created. So Peter Sexton is joining us today, and Peter is the project director of the Vaccinated Economy Regional Trials, and Long Ong is joining us today, and Long is the project manager of this really important undertaking on behalf of government. We're also really pleased that we actually have 3 businesses who are involved in the trials at the moment, who have graciously agreed to join us, and they'll be able to give some of their firsthand experiences and accounts of what they've gone through over the process of the last 2 weeks. So joining us today, we have Kimberly Brown from the North Pier Hotel in Cowes. Welcome, Kimberly, and Crystal Stubbs, who's the director of the East Gippsland Art Gallery, and also Peter Wittig, who's with Phillip Island Nature Parks. So the 3 of them will be talking after our presentation about their firsthand experiences and sharing some of their learnings having gone through this journey, which I think is really important for our operators to hear. Peter, before I throw to you, I just want to remind, because I'm seeing a lot of people putting stuff into the chat, I just want to remind everyone, please put your questions into the Q&A platform. I can't manage the 2 platforms of both chat and Q&A. So all your questions, please put into the Q&A platform so we don't miss any. And we've already got 8 questions in there, Peter, and you haven't even spoken yet. So, Peter, I'll turn over to you, and thank you and Long very much for, number one, helping us to coordinate this, but making yourselves available to share today, because, you know, clearly this is really important to so many people. So over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Felicia. And thank you, Long, for getting the slides up very quickly. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. I'm really keen to share with you what we have done in the Vaccinated Economy regional trials, what experiences we've learned, and particularly what lessons you can learn from those trials to help you get ready for 11:59 and 59 seconds tonight when we hit go in moving into the Phase B settings across the state. And indeed, as we march into the Phase C settings, not that long after that, with the vaccination rates being as positive as they are. So a little bit about the trials and what we were hoping to achieve from those. Obviously, this is something new. We've never worked in Australia previously, and this is happening all around the world. We've never differentiated access to goods and services by a particular type of setting, and vaccination status being the one we are doing here. And that is something new for businesses. That is different. It brings with it some challenges, and behind the scenes, government has been working very rapidly at trying to come up with support systems for that style of economy, and in particular, looking at the digital application that has been developed to provide the double tick to say somebody's vaccinated, and pulling that through from the federal register of immunisations, etc. So that's all very new, and the trial was set up really to just have a quick advanced test of how those settings work in practice, and looking at the digital application, and also the functionality, the practicality and the logistics at a shop front level in how we get customers to show their vaccination status or their exemptions, what all the challenges are to that, what are the challenges to the staff in learning the do's and the don'ts of asking, and what communications are required to educate patrons and to educate staff, and to ensure basically that those obligations are met. And of course, a not insignificant part of the trial was to test the effectiveness as a mobile technology platform in a more practical environment. So to get about that, we set up a program 3 weeks ago. This is all very, very quick, with a 4-step approach. One, working with the peak bodies to select some suitable sites in regional Victoria, in local government areas where we had pretty good or pretty high vaccination rates and low levels of COVID incidences, and particularly there with sites that gave us a good representation of the different type of industries and businesses that were being impacted as we moved into the Phase B settings, and of course businesses that have a good track record of being COVID compliant, etc., etc. And we then, for risk purposes, tried to get a pretty even spread across the different LGAs with those different types of industry groups, just in case during the trial we had an area that locked down, or if one site became a tier 1 site or such like, we had some redundancy in the program. Having gone through that site selection process, we then prepared the trial. We appointed case managers at each LGA level to work with those businesses to help them prepare, and this was done very, very quickly, to prepare both venue security and support, making sure the comms and the training materials were distributed to them that were appropriate for the trial purposes. Their staff are aware of what needed to happen, and really they were ready to go. And of course, behind all this, we need to make sure we had formal authority to operate under the trial conditions, which required sign off from the Chief Health Officer to enable the trials to actually occur in a as safe as possible manner. And then the trial kicked off on the 11th of October, originally slated to go through to the 26th of October, but we did very carefully word that in, or until we actually went to Phase B settings across the state. So we will be finishing the trial at midnight tonight, which is ahead of when we planned to, because we are moving across the whole state into that. And throughout that trial period, we've had daily meetings between the case managers and the venues, and then the case managers and the trial team to collate feedback and information back to the centre. And I've been briefing representatives from other departments who are involved in the rollout more broadly, so health, etc., in findings and observations from the trial to ensure those lessons have been learned as quickly as possible to help prepare for the entire state rollout. And a number of those lessons were taken on, particularly from the app team and other areas to help prepare us for the real go live from tonight. So I've got a bit of a mud map here showing where our trial sites were, and as you can see, it's a good spread across the state, and yeah, and each with their own case managers and the like. Right, so what do we ask of the businesses during the trial? Obviously, we ask that they continue to operate in a COVID-safe manner. So, in effect, the Phase A regional settings still applied to these businesses throughout. And then for the purposes of the trial, we got an exemption from the Chief Health Officer to allow them to work at the different cap or patron cap numbers that are applicable at Phase B, provided that they ensure that all patrons over the age of 16 comply with the fully vaccinated requirements, using both digital and non-digital evidence. We had an attestation from each of the businesses saying they would work to the key bits about being COVID safe, etc. And a little note here, for the purposes of the trial, we did not require all businesses to have all their staff fully vaccinated, because that was well ahead of any curve that was being considered at the time. So we were able to get exemption for that for the trial. In terms of permissible evidence, so reasonable steps needed to be taken by those businesses to ensure that everybody that entered as a patron was appropriate in terms of the fully vaxxed requirements. There are 3 forms of evidence that they were asked to provide. The first and the best, the gold standard, if you will, is the Service Victoria QR check-in that when set up properly shows no longer just the 1 tick, but that second line with the green bar and a second tick to show that the link to the immunisation register to show that that person has a full vaccination status. If they don't, obviously it comes up, I think, as amber and with a status unknown, and that person is not to be provided entry to the venue. The second version that's applicable was just the digital certificate itself, straight from the Medicare app. So the full green screen that says this person is immunised is okay as well. And failing that, a printed version of that certificate from the Medicare page is okay as well. And if a person has problems getting that themselves at home, they can get that printed by their medical practitioner, their vaccination provider, or they can apply to the Australian Immunisation Register, which does have a hotline during the week, and get a copy of that printed and sent out to them. That does take a couple of weeks to get to the individual, so that's not all that relevant for the trial, but that is certainly a legitimate option as well. And the other important category of people who are exempt from the requirement of getting vaccinations. There are a small category of people who have legitimate medical exemptions, and that can be demonstrated by a valid original letter from their medical practitioner to say that. And of course, patrons under the age of 16 are exempt. That typically for the trial we haven't had too many issues proving that, because most of the businesses have said, well, you need to come in with somebody who is a parent or a guardian, and that covers that. And yeah, those are the forms of evidence. Really important, and remembering, of course, the trial was set up well in advance of going the full statewide position. So the team were pretty busy in getting help from DPC to prepare, and health to get materials to support the businesses. And I've got here some examples of the posters that we provided. These were all printed out and couriered rapidly out to all the sites just in time. We were very much just in time in getting the trial set up. So the kinds of posters were information for the customer as to what you need to do to prove your vaccination status. And that post was quite important. I'll come back to that in a little while with some top tips, and what proof you need to require, and also for the staff on how to check for that vaccination status. Now these in the tier, you can tell the teal is from the trial. There are updated versions of these that are a little bit more up to date in terms of messaging, because obviously we tweaked this between lessons learned from the trial and more broadly as health get the settings just right for the actual phase B. These materials are available online. I've got the link there through the coronavirus.vic.gov.au website. If you go into the section for science posters and templates under business information, you'll be able to access the most up-to-date version of all of these. So, getting to the guts of it, what did we find? What was the main outcomes of the trial? The trial was very effective in providing insights into the business's ability to operate. I have to big shout out to our participating businesses. They all approached this in a very positive manner and looked to work around any problems that they uncovered along the way. They certainly have applied the settings for checking vaccination status, and they've all been bold enough and confident enough in turning patrons away who did not have appropriate evidence of full vaccination. We did find public awareness was a challenge throughout the course of the program, remembering again that the trial ran well in advance of the wider media coverage of what's going on with phase B, and there is a very large media campaign being rolled out by the government at the moment for getting ready for a vaccinated economy. We were well in advance of that program, so for a lot of our businesses, they did need to spend a bit of time, and hopefully not as much as will happen in real life, but in educating patrons on the requirements and how to download the app and such like. We did see, as I mentioned before, that in some settings there have been quite a lot of turnaways, particularly those where we had more elderly or digitally challenged customers and patrons. So they were having to be turned away for not providing appropriate proof of vaccination. I think most of those though were not turned away for not being vaccinated. They just didn't have the materials with them when they arrived at the door. And I know, anecdotally at least, that a lot of them, the feedback was a lot of them then came back an hour later and were able to get in, having gone home and got the right stuff done to get that going. Certainly through the course of the trial, there was a strong upward trend in the number of patrons using the app to check in. The majority of our businesses said the first 2 days were probably the busiest for them, with customers unaware of what requirements they needed to provide or how to do this. And the first 2 days, there was quite a lot of noise, particularly for the trial sites, and it was advertised that these are the trial sites, and they became a little bit of a beacon for the anti-vax movement, and there was a bit of online trolling and the like for our trial sites. But I think most of the businesses reported back that decreased over the time of the trial, and indeed, quite a few of them said they also got a lot of positive feedback on their online media, on their socials, saying, really proud that you're part of the trial and getting us to a safer way to operate. So I think on balance, it was less of an issue than we were worried that it would be. We were certainly very worried about major security incidents. There was a lot of time in discussing security issues, etc. And I'm really happy to say we had no major security incidents at all. There were 2 issues that were escalated to police. There was one anti-vax demonstration nearby to one of our venues, but that didn't have as big a problem, issue or challenge as we were worried it might be. So in all, the security side of things went much more smoothly than we were worried about. And participating businesses, we observed a number of very simple and effective workarounds, and I'll come to top tips in a moment, to reduce congestion at doors and to help patrons get ready, which I'll come to in a moment. Generally looking beyond just the business themselves, looking more broadly at the communities in which they operated. The local communities, the strong sense is that it was increasingly positive towards the double vaccinated operations. I think a lot of people talked about the safety of feeling comfortable being in those venues with increased numbers under those rules. And we had certainly a lot of media early in the trial, and generally it was positive media. And as I mentioned before, the use of digital certificates and particularly the Service-vic app has gone up and up throughout the trial. And I note from this morning we have had over 1.9 million certificates linked statewide, and I certainly expect that to balloon further over the weekend as we move into the broader settings. And a number of the councils are really fantastic as well, and introduce some pop-up sites to help people link their digital certificates, or mobile vans. I think one of the councils opened up their library with sessions in the library for people to come in and have it explained on how to do it and get helped to get that done. So some real, generally really positive involvement. Top tips. I thought this group would be interested in some of the top tips from our businesses. Two main areas. The first is really important to help prepare customers ahead of them actually getting to the door. So they get to the door and have a problem, don't know what to do. Obviously, a queue builds up behind that person who doesn't know what to do. So a lot of them set up almost like pre-greeting areas or a table full of information before they actually get to the door, so that they can work out what certification they need, have the posters there that say how to download, etc., so they can get all that done before they actually get to the door. Equally, in some of the really busy sites, like cinemas in particular, would be one that pointed there. It was a bit like when you go to the airport and you've got nothing to declare lines. They sort of had two entrances for those who have got their QR code ready to go. You can enter through this door. If you need more support and help, come through this door or this entrance, to have fast track entrances. And the other one, which I think again our cinema clearly pointed to the much better outcomes they had once they worked out a way of having something on the booking side of it, that when people are booking, they get very clear guidance as to what will be required when they arrive at the venue to be allowed entrance. And the other really big tip is being prepared for that odd customer who is not happy with the rules and is disruptive about it. The general guidance I've got there, obviously you're going to get some of these people, but having somewhere to point to them, say these are the rules that we're following, that we're regulated by government, it's not us, and giving them somewhere to go to escalate their grumpiness. Pretty much the coronavirus.vic.gov.au website or the hotline, away from the business was a good step and something that helped prepare for that. Otherwise, you are, or beyond that, really, you're back to normal approaches in dealing with disruptive customers. And if you need to, 000 is the escalation point there if someone won't calm down. So those are the main top tips that we got from our businesses. And just my final word, just looking beyond the trial, where are we going to from here? Obviously, the whole state will move into phase B settings from tonight. There are other activities underway to adopt some of the learnings from the trials. We are going to conduct trials in how to operate major public events. You've probably heard about that with the My Music Bowl event, and I think Derby Day is the other one we are looking to have a trial for major public events to work out how to run those under the fully vaccinated economy settings. The Service-vic app, there is further development of that underway, particularly looking at how to do a group check-in or a family check-in. So how one person can have other certificates logged on their phone, so that when they check in, they can check in 4 or 5 people, rather than have every single person have to check in one by one when you're turning up as a group. And of course, a really important one for everybody is the launch of the Get Ready campaign materials to enhance that public awareness and readiness to make things a bit easier for business. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Just before we go to our next part of this session, I just wanted to stress just 2 things. Number one, I see people still putting questions into the chat. Please put your questions into the Q&A. I'm not going to be able to run both. There's already 30 questions in the Q&A, so we're going to have a lot to get through. Can I also, I do want to make the point to everyone that Peter and Lung are not with the Department of Health and Human Services. So I know that there are questions in those Q&A, because I've been looking at them, that relate to things around requirements for vaccine status. We are not going to be able to answer those questions today because that is just not in the remit of our guests this morning. However, what we are doing is keeping track of all these questions, and we have other channels with government where we will be able to raise these issues, and we'll have to come back to you separately to actually try and answer some of the other questions. But I just want everyone to recognise and respect that Lung and Peter can only answer those questions that are within their remit to be able to do today, because I can see from that list there's a lot of questions. We're already up to 34 now. So you are going to challenge my tasks as facilitating these questions. But before we move on, I think it's really important. Today, we're very grateful that we actually have 3 of the businesses that have participated in the trials and be able to speak firsthand about their experiences and how they've managed some of the challenges. I know that many of you are very afraid of what's in front of you. So I might start, if that's okay with you, Kimberly. Kim, your establishment was probably very famous very quickly in these trials, because I know that the North Point Cafe was in the newspaper with some challenges that you confronted with some anti-vaxxers locally. Can you talk a little bit about how you managed that process, but then also what you've seen evolve since that early start of the process?
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. It did all happen rather quickly, as was mentioned earlier. So we're all scrambling to get organised to open the doors, and staff had anxiety at the time about going back to work and being able to police the new rules. And then we were confronted with an onslaught of media at the same time, which was all very chaotic. But generally the media were very good to us. They were trying to get good news stories out about businesses reopening. They weren't there to create a vaccination versus anti-vaccination campaign against us. They were generally very helpful. So they were good to speak to. It did cause, however, a lot of backlash towards our business with reviews and comments and things being posted on social media and on Google reviews. Every time the media mentioned North Pier Hotel, we had a bit of an onslaught of commentary come back at us. Some of that was from people that were interstate. It wasn't local to us. It was a lot of the profiles appeared to be made up, an organised lobby group almost type situation. A lot of those things were easily removed. We could take them down. The Google reviews came down. They were all irrelevant to our business. And what was happening online was the complete opposite of what we were experiencing on the ground. We were being overwhelmed by support, customers coming in because they heard about it, they wanted to be a part of it, they wanted to try their QR code out. We were not met with any of the confronting negativity that the staff were fearing and being anxious about. It was not there on the ground at all. So I just wanted to, I guess, highlight that for other businesses that might be feeling a little bit anxious about it, about having to ask someone whether they're vaccinated or not vaccinated, and about what might happen online to them. It's not what happened on the ground. On the first day, we hired a security guard to help be our COVID marshal, because we didn't know what to expect because of what was happening online. And on the second day, I said to him, you don't need to come back, because it was just also welcoming and easy. And yes, we had some people turn up that were unvaccinated, some people turn up that only had 1 vaccination, not 2, and they were completely understanding and they got it. So yeah, it's actually been a rather easy week for us. Previously, our staff, as everyone knows, having to monitor whether you've got a mask, whether you're sitting down or standing up to have a drink, whether you're from Melbourne or not from Melbourne, all these things that the staff are policing, and then asking them to police vaccination seemed like an added weight to them, but it wasn't. It was just so easy, and the type of people that are coming through that are fully vaccinated, they're wearing their masks, they're sitting down to eat and drink, they know the rules, and we're actually finding it a lot easier than it's been for the last 2 years of all these rules changing all the time. This new phase has probably been the easiest for us to go into as operationally on the ground.
It's really interesting, Kimberly, because there's got a lot of feedback there. Sorry about that. I know that that's something that many of our operators are very concerned about. So really good to hear that, you know, it has kind of evolved into something that's been a more positive experience as opposed to the negativity that you were anticipating. Just so everyone is aware, in the chat, one of our team has actually posted, there's a link in there on how you manage Google reviews. Kimberly mentioned about the fact that, you know, there was some barrage of comments through their review systems. You might want to just copy that over and put that into your system to look at it another time, but just helping you to manage those reviews and remove things if you need to, because they are, you know, obviously not appropriate comments for people to be making. Crystal, I'm going to turn to you next. In our conversations, you've spoken quite a lot about the very positive experience that you've had with your local council and how supportive that they've been in kind of helping with all of the sort of transition that your customers are going through. Can you share that with our audience today?
Oh, absolutely. So, so at the beginning of the trial, a bit like what Kimberly was discussing, we were quite apprehensive going into the trial that we may get a bit of backlash. But like Kimberly said, oh my gosh, it's been so positive. We've had the loveliest people come in. But I think because we were a trial site, we had a lot of people come in to test their apps, perhaps ask questions, you know, they needed help, you know, linking all the apps and things like that. And because it's a small community, you know, it was word of mouth, and, you know, people would say, oh, you know, the gallery's doing, you know, they're helping people with their apps, so go and see them. So we were quite overwhelmed with visitors who needed help. And so our front of house staff, we have one, she had to spend most of her time helping people. So after we had met with Kimberly, our RDV had organised a bit of a catch-up session via Zoom. What Kimberly said about how Shire had been supporting them by providing them a bus out the front where people could come, and the Shire staff would help them download their apps and link them all together. Tim, our case manager, and ourselves thought that was a great idea. So, you know, that sharing that knowledge has been really beneficial. So, of course, we contacted, you know, our CEO, and he said, absolutely, you know, if we can help. And so the van was down. They brought a van down the next day. Essentially, it was parked out the front at 9 o'clock. We popped it on social media, and they've been busy ever since. So they've been really, really supportive, which is good. But yeah, I think what we've really gotten out of it is that it's that sharing of knowledge. So like I said, with Kimberly, where we've really benefited. So we've had meetings with other public galleries that have been part of the trial. So in Bendigo and Warrnambool, and they have learnings that, you know, that we've been able to take on board. And similarly, they've been able to take some of our learnings on board. And so I think this has been a time of great generosity in terms of sharing that information with local council, with RDV, with the state government, with other public galleries and other businesses that are part of the trial. And I know in terms of how we've been engaging with other galleries in East Gippsland, of which there are many, they're really keen to know about how the trial has worked for us and if we've got any tips for them. And so I think moving forward, I think what's going to be really beneficial to a lot of businesses is that discussion with each other. So, you know, if you know, next door's, shop front or something like that, there's so much opportunity to share what you've learned, and perhaps they can, the conversations about, what you can accept, how's it been working for you, and things like that. I think we're all kind of going into this in a really positive way, you know, we want Victoria to open up. You know, this is such a great step forward that I think, yeah, if it's part of the conversation, you know, with everyone that we know in the community, then it's going to make all that easier and more of a positive experience.
Yeah, that's great, Crystal. It's really, really great to hear the community engagement. And Peter, I jotted down a note. I love the idea of the libraries getting involved and doing tutorials. Couldn't think of a better place to go to learn than to a library. So yeah, some really interesting stuff that's emerging. Thanks so much, Crystal. Peter, you've had some really interesting comments as well in some of the stuff that you've dealt with at Phillip Island. But in particular, you spoke about, with our conversation the other day, you spoke about how some of the more vulnerable people in your community are viewing this opportunity to come out and re-engage now.
Yeah, absolutely, Felicia. Peter mentioned before, as part of the vaccination trials, our staff didn't need to be double vaxxed. However, we were fortunate enough within our team, we have around 80 staff. So we were able to go out and ask for volunteers who were fully vaxxed. So our trial site was not only the guests fully vaxxed, but also staff. And one of the things that we had feedback from is that the vulnerable community, we had a couple instances where they said that they had been fearful to come out and not wanting to interact in public over the last couple of years, and that by knowing that not only were the guests fully vaccinated and the staff were vaccinated, they could come out and enjoy our sites, which was really great. You know, it wasn't something that we'd even considered at that time when we did do the fully vaxxed staff, but it was something that was really great for the staff to see that, you know, again, like Crystal and Kimberly have spoken about, all of us were really nervous about how this would play out. We had security as well. They had a great day just sitting down chatting to people versus the sort of what we pictured to be. And that was really a good news story for us in that space, and being able to open up for people that, you know, probably had a really rough, we've all had a rough, you know, 2021, but even more so.
Yeah, that's very true, Peter. Thank you. It is comforting to hear that, you know, I think everyone went into this with the same level of heightened anxiety and concern and literally fear, I think, about what we were facing. But interesting to see that quickly that dissipated, and there was a real change of tenor in terms of the people that you had to deal with. Now I'm conscious we've actually got 62 questions in the Q&A already, guys. So I'm going to work my way down from the top. We are not going to be able to get through everything. If everyone has an extra 5 or 10 minutes, maybe we could run till about 10 past if you're able to. But I'm going to start at the top. Ladies and gentlemen, we will not get through everything, which I didn't think we would today. So whatever we cannot answer, we will work through putting answers together for you, which we will circulate separately. And as I said, there's going to be some that really Peter and Long aren't going to be able to answer. And we'll put those through different channels with government so we don't miss anything. Now, there's a question here. I'm not sure that you can answer this one, guys, but I'm going to ask it. I think I know the answer, but this is actually from an accommodation provider. Now, right now, accommodation is actually not, they weren't part of the trials because there's no requirement for accommodation to require that their guests are fully vaccinated. So I guess the question that's coming here is more around, you know, legally, are they able to, if they determine they would rather have all their guests vaccinated, can they do that? Is that something that you're able to answer, either Peter or Long?
Well, I'd love to be able to say I know the answer to that. I know through setting up in the trials, there are a lot of really complicated and specific questions for different industries. And I know we were looking at an accommodation provider, and we questions even under the general guidance that don't affect, we're not affected by phase B and phase C, but then there are questions about restaurants on site, lobby areas, etc. What rules might apply. I don't have the answers to that, I'm afraid.
I can say that we have raised this issue, a very similar issue, through we have a weekly meeting with the department where we have actually an issues register that grows by the day. And this is actually in that list. So while we can't provide you with an answer today, it is on our issues register, and it is something that BTIC will be coming out in our communications, and we'll be explaining as soon as we have some answers to that. For the moment, do operators still need to check IDs, given that, as well as the vax status, while Metro is not released? I think the answer to that is probably yes. Is that correct, Peter?
Yeah,
okay, good. Keen to understand if there are any details on travel restrictions for unvaccinated people once we are at 80% target. Again, I think this is one of those questions that we're not going to be able to answer today. I don't know, Peter Lung, can you shed any light in that space? Guys, sorry, can I just, guys, who on our end, just making sure that we keep all the ones I haven't been able to answer, because we'll answer those through another system. Sorry, Lung, go ahead.
Our answer would be exactly whatever you find on the internet on that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's to defer it to the roadmap, which doesn't mention that you do have to be double vaxxed to travel intrastate at the 80%, but that's a best, I guess, by way of policy document to go by for now.
Yeah. And again, guys, in all the communications that VTEC's been putting out, we have both the roadmap for regional Victoria and the roadmap for Metro Melbourne. And you do need to look at them individually based on where you're located, because the rules are definitely different. What options are there for businesses who wish to operate regardless of the vaccination capacity status, e.g. operate at a lesser capacity? I could probably answer that one because I just had that discussion in our session this morning. The fact is that if you are not prepared to meet the vaccination requirements, then you cannot escalate to the higher levels of operation. Now, if you're in Metropolitan Melbourne, your next level down is that you have been closed. So in some instances for Metropolitan Melbourne businesses, if you're not prepared to accommodate the vaccination requirement, then as a hospitality venue, for instance, you would only be able to do takeaway, because that's your previous setting. But if you are, an experience of some sort and you have been closed, your previous setting is that you're not operating, so you wouldn't be able to operate. Again, you do need to refer to those roadmaps. If you're in regional Victoria, it is different. Regional Victoria has been operating at low levels as of the 70% vaccination rate, and only allowing fully vaccinated people in your site, in your establishment, means that you can increase your numbers to the higher level at phase B. If you want to operate with unvaccinated people on your premise, you can only operate at the next level down on the roadmap. Again, please refer to that roadmap for regional Victoria and for Metropolitan Melbourne. And again, a lot of the communications that we've been putting out over the last week in particular, we've tried to really explain all of that. So hopefully that gives you some help. Given the extra costs in staffing to enforce access regulations and reduce seatings, etc., are any businesses imposing COVID rule surcharges? Interesting one. My fear is that without higher prices, it makes it impossible for many businesses. I might ask our businesses to jump in, but I know I spoke to one on the phone yesterday who is doing that. So I know one business in regional Victoria that is actually introducing a COVID surcharge. Ladies, any comments on your end that you've heard anything from anyone out there?
Alicia, I think I hadn't heard about that before. It's something to consider, I guess, particularly for smaller businesses. We had our COVID Marshal spending a lot of time helping people connect the apps. It was a case of getting them through the door, showing their ID, seeing their certificate, paper or other. How about you go order a drink, order your food, sit down, and if I've got a moment, the staff can come around and check and maybe spend a few minutes trying to link up the app for you. They were doing that in exchange for a good review. So I don't know what a good review is worth, whether it's worth not imposing an extra charge, but instead getting the good review online. But that was our fee for helping people connect their apps.
Yeah. Point. Peter, were you going to say something?
Yeah, we actually got senior leadership to come out. So myself, the CEO, we were out there on those days as that pre-greet to assist the staff. Probably not a long-term solution, but I think as I expressed to Felicia the other day, I feel like this is similar to the QR code. You put a lot of energy into it at the initial stages, and then it will get easier and the staffing requirements will minimise. So again, we are a larger organisation, which is we've been able to draw on that, but getting those leaders from out behind desks and getting in front of our guests also helped show to our team that we were willing to also, be that front facing with them.
Good point. Crystal, did you want to add anything there?
Not really. I think Kimberly and Peter have pretty much covered it. We didn't even think about it, to be honest with you. It was just something that we kind of had to do. It was kind of, part of the job of being part of the trial. But once Shire got on board with the van, which I believe they're going to continue, I think that's really helped us. We just have to say g'day and welcome people in, and if they're waiting for their turn on the bus, we'll give them. We've got lollies. We give people lollies.
There's some cracking ideas that you've got there.
Keeps them happy.
Yeah, good one. Look, I'm conscious this next question I don't think anyone on this call can answer, so I might take this one offline because it has to do with operations of Parks Victoria and upcoming directions from them. So I will take that one offline and I'll contact our colleagues at Parks Victoria to get an answer on that one directly. The next one really has to do with, I guess, kind of where is the authoritative guidance. This one is actually from someone who operates a Centrelink agency on Phillip Island. And there are a lot of, federal, state and government, federal, state and local government that they have to follow in terms of oversight and regulation. And I would agree with you, Greg, on this one. There is a lot of contradiction between federal, state and local at times. I guess, sadly, I would think, and again, guys, please jump in here, but in terms of an authoritative, definitive voice, there are things that the feds are responsible for and things that the state government are responsible for. So you're not going to be able to find, as far as I'm aware, one site that's going to bring all that together. I don't know, Peter, Long, any comments there? I know it's tough, but I can't see how that could come together in one site anywhere.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair call, Felicia, and there is a lot to get on board. From a state government perspective, I think the restricted activity directives are the prime, or directions are the primary authoritative document to keep an eye on. And obviously there is, as you mentioned before, there is a regional set and a metropolitan set at the moment, and they will be being updated for the Phase B settings as well.
And we do try as much as possible and as quickly as possible, Peter. We also try to get communications out to industry from VTIC as well. There are a couple of questions here around the forms of paperwork that can be accepted. I think Peter actually touched on that in his presentation in terms of you either have it on the Service-Vic app, which will verify your vaccination status. You can accept it in the Apple Wallet or the equivalent of a non-Apple device, or potentially you can have it in paper form if necessary. So is that cover those three things off, Peter?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the paper form has to be the one from the immunisation register, the one from Medicare, which you get through your MyGov Medicare space. It has to be that one. So you can print that at home. You can get it printed by your medical practitioner because they've got access to your records. You can get it from your vaccination provider because they've got those, or the Australian Immunisation Register to get it mailed out if someone has got a printer.
One quick little.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead,
Sorry, Felicia. I was just going to chime in and just, I think Lung and myself and some more of the participating trial sites, we had discussed those visuals. So just so it's easier for, people on the front line, people in retail, they can see exactly what you can accept and what you can't accept. And I believe Lung said that was part of the documentation that's going to be available. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And a cute little story there. I think just when you look at innovation and the way some people work problems through, I think at one of our sites the local Medicare provider was printing them out for people, and then they shrunk them.
Nice? Yeah.
Then they shrunk them to wallet size, and then they laminated them. So it's generally older people that don't have the digital app, so they could put them in their wallet, so they weren't having to have a piece of paper folded up and tearing and what have you. I thought that is clever, and that's the kind of innovation that works.
Service above and beyond. Yeah, fantastic. Hey, just a quick tip that actually Peter and I realized we had an epiphany moment when we were speaking last night. One of the hardest parts about this process is connecting your MyGov to your Medicare, because your Medicare account is actually where that vaccination certificate sort of originates from. And one of the worst things it asks you in making that connection is, what was the date of your last doctor's appointment? And who remembers that? And that's been a real challenge for these guys as they've tried to work through this with individuals who weren't prepared. So we had our epiphany moment because we realized if they have a Medicare account, they can simply go into that Medicare account. There'll be a history of everything that they have paid for you against Medicare. So you'll be able to find the date of the last medical appointment that you had and the doctor that you visited. It'll be in the Medicare system. So it's something we hadn't thought about, but I know all the guys have talked about that as a challenge in getting these things all connected. There's a question here on what form of exemptions are being accepted for those not vaccinated, and how does this present or show on the Vic Services app? Any comments, guys, on that one?
I can certainly comment on that one. There is work being done. This is one of the updates to the app that hopefully will come downstream around exemptions. There are very few medical exemptions for not getting vaccinated, so it is actually quite tightly controlled, and you will need a valid original letter from your doctor saying you are exempt. And you need to show that to the at the door for an exemption, and obviously there's quite a bit of scrutiny on that as a potential fraud area, and obviously we've seen the case up in the Gold Coast of someone making those up. So that is obviously it's not in the business's responsibility to check which doctor it is and all of that, but it has to be a letter from the doctor and with letterhead, etc.
And again, I think in the public health order, there's very clear, I remember looking it up, and I think it's on page 11 or page 12 of the public health order, because I know we put that out to members as well, where it very clearly states the exemptions that are allowed, and it is a very, very narrow list of exemptions. I mean, you can't just get a letter from your doctor that says, oh, they don't like needles, for instance. There are very, very definitive and narrow excuses for why you can't be vaccinated under the public health order.
And I think that's been pretty regulated through AMA. And I know what they're trying to do is through Medicare, so federally rather than Services Victoria, but make sure that exemption is then recorded in your Medicare record as a vaccination status, so that somebody who's exempt will hopefully, in the fullness of time, be able to show a double green tick, and it doesn't show unknown. It will show a double green tick. They don't need to show that they're exempt or anything. It just says they're for the purposes of they're vaccinated.
Yeah. 1.2 on that, Peter. I know you've spoken before about this, but I don't think it got mentioned today. On the Service Vic app, I mean, you either have the green tick if your certificate is loaded into the app. When you check in on the QR code, it could potentially come up with a red line instead of a green line. It just means that the vaccination status cannot be verified. So people might well have a vaccination certificate, but they haven't figured out how to get it into their Service Vic app. So in which case, that's when you can refer to either the Apple Wallet or the non-Apple product wallet, I forget what they call it. So there are other options, but just because the line comes up red when you check in doesn't mean that they're not vaccinated. It just means that the system cannot confirm their vaccination. So it's just a little point. Now, I don't know, again, if you could answer this question, it might be one we have to put on our list to take to government, but rules about outdoor markets that are not just food. Do we need to monitor vaccination status of attendees? Is the market responsible for keeping vaccination records for stall holders as they're responsible for themselves as a small business?
Yeah, no, I don't think we can answer that one long.
Okay, we actually might put that one. That's a really good question, and we'll put that onto our issues register with the department. I'm trying to flick through these as fast as I can, but we're never going to get through all these questions. For hotel motel accommodation, do you know of any clear government instructions or documents that that state if we are allowed to have unvaccinated or single dose vaccinated guests stay with us? Again, I think with this question here, accommodation at this point is not required to have their guests fully vaccinated. And as I understand it, largely because accommodation does need to be available for emergency accommodation, they have deemed that exempt from the requirements for guests to be fully vaccinated. So that is the rule as it stands at this point in time. However, businesses can make a choice if you choose that you want to require your guests to be fully vaccinated. Next question is, are we allowed to ask for ID to support options 2 and 3? So if they use I guess what Roger's referring to there is if they use their Apple Wallet or the paper verification, should they ask or can they ask for further ID to substantiate?
I don't exactly know. Look, I don't know if you've got an update on that. I know it was something that had been raised in the past. Kimberly, was it something we had to? You have to do it already in the country, don't you? So it's
you do. And actually, on the posters that have come out today, it clearly says you do. It's got the certificate and then the ID. So yes, you do, and you have to, if you're in regional or Melbourne anyway at the moment, given the divide, to make sure that people aren't travelling either way.
Okay. Question, do businesses have the right to refuse entry of non-vaccinated people or those who refuse to show their vax status?
That's a resounding yes.
Yep. Can you clarify how businesses are not in breach of privacy laws regarding sensitive medical information? Can you provide the instrument of legislation? That simply falls under the public health order, guys. Once there's a public health order, that is your legal document that you can refer to. You are protected on the grounds of acting under the confines and directive of a public health order. And that's what you would refer people to.
Yeah, and also to that end, we're not expecting businesses to keep information on patrons. It is purely just when you walk in to show the green tick or the piece of paper or whatever it is you've got to show your vaccination. We're not keeping records. We're not writing down what people have done. And the great thing about the app is it doesn't say anything about your medical history other than you're willing to show you're vaccinated. And if somebody's not willing to show that because they don't want to share that piece of information, they don't have to. It just means they won't have access to the venue under the health regulations.
Yeah. Next question here. This is actually an interesting one. It comes from one of our members in the caravan parks industry. Was there anyone in the trial who was allowed to accept unvaccinated patrons, provided they didn't use internal facilities? This is the position we find ourselves in as a holiday park. So that we are allowed to accept unvaccinated guests, but have to prevent them from using communal facilities. I think, first of all, I could probably take that one on board as well, because this is what is exactly on our issues register with government at the moment, I actually raised this the minute that this came out from the accommodation sector, that they have multi-use activities on their site, accommodation not being required, but yet the restaurants and bars that would be on the premises would be required to have vaccinated guests. So it is an issue that we've got on the live register at the moment with government department that we're working through in this area. And the answer to that one will probably come into the points that you're encountering in the caravan and camping sector, but we absolutely have this on the issues register. This is an interesting one. What happens for businesses that have no mobile network or reception? Because we do have some of those folk out there in some of the more regional and rural areas. Is there any answer for that?
Yeah, so yeah, well, it's a paper, but also you do have your Apple Wallet or whatever it is for the other phones. So you do have that one, and that's effectively live. You don't need to be on the internet to get that to work. So if they don't have a phone or digital, then they're going to have the paper-based. I think this is there's a cultural learning here for not just for businesses but for consumers as well about what you need to have to enter these types of premises in a vaccinated economy world. And this is a public safety issue. It's at the heart of that. So it is important, and people will have to learn and adapt or be disappointed.
This next question, I can again answer this one because we just had this come up in our meeting with the department today. Joe, your question around the age groups 12 plus versus 16 plus. In the roadmap, through phases B and C, these fully vaccinated requirements only apply to people over the age of 16. When we get to group D, it will then go down to everyone over the age of 12. But for right now, the limit is at age 16, and anyone under the age of 16, as I understand it, as long as they are with parents that are both fully vaccinated, there shouldn't be any problem. But the requirement through phases B and C, because I know a number of people had this question, is 16 plus. We don't go into the 12 plus until we get out to phase D. Will visitor information centres be required to check addresses and vaccination status? Again, I don't know if you guys have advice. I've got a little bit of stuff that's come through yesterday on the VICs. Peter Long, anything in that space?
No, not that immediately comes to mind. I would end up deferring to the roadmap and what's published on there, which is probably what you've got too, Felicia.
Yeah, and I think there was an advice, I think, that came out yesterday or the day before yesterday that VICs now fall into the mix of being required to have fully vaccinated, meaning both staff and guests. But let us look into that one, and we can come back to that with a separate answer. But I know that there was some advice that came out yesterday. I'd rather refer back to that advice so we don't lead you down the wrong garden path. But there is a bit of advice on how VICs need to operate. The next one, again, probably this one's more about school camps. And I know that there's a lot of work going on in that space at the moment that we're looking at with school camps and how they'll need to operate. Again, I'm going to need to take that one offline because that falls with a different part of government that we're working this through. But this is a very active and live conversation as well. Someone's noted here, my QR code registers one tick for me, and I'm also double vaccinated. I'm not quite sure what that means, what that question is there, Dee. I'm not sure what you're asking. Will we get an update on the public events framework today? Again, not in this session because it's not really one that's applicable here. But we had, again, another meeting just before this call today where they are working through the requirements from an events perspective, and there will be information coming out, I'm very sure, in the not too distant future, because obviously we need to get that information before we hit the 80% threshold. Again, this is getting into a campground, so I'm going to put this one into the other box of conversation that we need to sort out at with another part of government. Is there an application process to be involved in the event trials? So this probably has to do with the fact that, within Melbourne, Peter, you mentioned about the trials that would be happening for events. Is there any process by which people can apply to be part of the trials?
I think, Long, you're the man for this one.
No, not that. I understand that it's been planned, aside from the two that have been announced. So I understand there's no public process at this stage.
Okay, there's no process. Basically, they've earmarked which events they intend to use then, I guess is what you're saying, Long, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. The next question I think I've answered already in terms of the 12 versus 16. We won't have the 12 and under won't be an issue until we get out to phase D. And at this point, again, as I understand it, as long as they're with fully vaccinated parents, there's no problem with letting a child in under the age of 12. Let's see what Bart is saying here. An email regarding accommodation guest vax requirements was crucial. I wonder, is there any data or finding from New South Wales that can be applied here? I'll probably take that one offline and we'll see what we can find out for you on that one, Bart. When is the launch of the Get Ready campaign, guys?
Well, it's not our team driving it, so it's hard for us to say with, give you a definitive ETA, but I know that they're moving on that as quick as they possibly can to coincide, obviously, with new settings.
Okay.
So I would have expected in the next 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, it's probably worth dropping out here. I know as part of that whole package of campaign, there have been a lot of very business-specific Q&As developed, materials developed, which will be coming out through the industry bodies and directly to businesses. I believe today, Lung, or if not today, first thing tomorrow, I believe is the plan.
Yeah, so the link that Peter referred to on one of the slides to templates and posters and things, I think that might be ready very, very soon. And that's certainly something we can circulate to all the peak organizations and participants. Yeah, but in terms of the broader kind of media public campaign going out, yeah, not too sure exactly when, but I know it's a priority to get that out soon for government.
Okay. Very good. I'm going to take one last question because I see it's already 12:10, and we still have a lot of questions that we can't get to. So as I say, what we'll do is we'll take all these questions offline. We'll sort them by the best responsible person to answer those questions, and we'll have to come back out to all of all of our participants today to answer some of these questions. So apologies, we could probably go on for another 45 minutes with the questions that are still in the chat. The last question I will ask, though, is one that Fiona's asked. Will there be an upgrade on the app so that it's not a reinstall? This seems to be a confusing point. Peter, any answer to that one?
Yeah, it shouldn't. It doesn't need a reinstall. I think there was a little challenge there early, so I don't know if the questioner had an early thing. There was a little issue early with Apple, and I don't know if it's still there, so it may still be. It was an Apple issue rather than a Service Vic issue, and that when you opened up the app in your app store, right, so if you already downloaded Service Victoria, it came up and it just said open, and if you click the blue button, it opened up the app, and you're going, well, that hasn't upgraded it. You actually had to go to the left of the blue button, click on the app, when you get the whole little description about the app and the stars and the comments. When you went to that screen, it said upgrade. So I think some people deleted it and then reloaded it. You didn't actually have to do that.
Okay.
And I know that it drove the developers mad, but it was something that was at the Apple end, not at our end, and yeah, they didn't know how to fix it.
Yeah. Peter, I know when I upgraded, because I've been successful. I've got mine loaded into my Service Vic app. And not only did I do it for myself, but I managed to figure out how to do it on my husband's phone, who's not an Apple user. So I was really challenged, but I got there. But I have to say, when I upgraded my app, I didn't have to do anything. I just went through my upgrades and it just naturally updated. So there wasn't any shift or change at that point. It was pretty straightforward. I just want to comment quickly. There's still a lot of stuff coming up about accommodation folk being required to ask for vaccinations and how do we do that. At this stage, I want to reiterate, accommodation is not required to have your guests double vaccinated. So this is not an issue for you at this point in time anyway. I can't promise what happens in the future, but obviously right now the rules are that accommodation providers do not have to require vaccination status of their guests in order to stay at their establishments, because there's quite a number of comment or questions in here which do pertain to accommodation. Guys, what we're going to try to do is we will take all these questions, we'll try to lump them into sort of similarity buckets, if I can use that as an expression, and we'll try to come out with answers rather than dealing with each individual question. We'll kind of put them together so that we can get some sort of synthesis to how we do this. But we will come back to you with the answers because there are many questions I just couldn't get to. I do quickly, while we still have about 300 people on the line here, Tamzeen, could you possibly put up the kind of next steps piece, because there's some very important information that we've got to share with you as well around what's coming up and what's next with these sessions. As you know, this is the first in our series of reopening webinars that we're doing for the industry. And next week is going to be a bit of a marathon because everything's been sort of pushed up and the timeline's been constricted. We've actually put all these sessions together for next week. There are two sessions I want to draw your attention to today, which are actually workshops. They are 2-hour workshops. They're not just a webinar. On the 26th of October, Tuesday, there's a session we're running with Alan Briggs doing customer aggression management training. And likewise, on Friday, the 29th, Alan will also be conducting a 2-hour webinar on exposure site procedures and training. As I know, many of you are very, very concerned about what happens if we're named as an exposure site. So these are 2 really important sessions. They are not just a webinar, they are workshops for 2 hours. And ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that, you know, I've seen these programs being put on by other organizations who are charging $300 and $400 to go through these programs per person. But because of our grant from the government, we're able to put these on for our industry at no charge. So I would encourage you to think about registering for those events. Wednesday, the 27th, we'll be doing a special session with Visit Victoria. We'll be talking about a range of their consumer communication campaigns that they're developing and a lot of things that they're doing to help industry get ready to open as well. And on Thursday, the 28th, we'll be conducting a back to work wellbeing session with our Partners in Wellbeing clinician. This one is very much targeted to staff who, as a lot of our guests today talked about in their businesses, staff were very concerned. A lot of anxiety out there about what people are being asked to do. So this is a webinar that we're doing specifically to provide staff with some tools and tips and ways to sort of manage some of the stress and anxiety that we're all feeling at the moment. So I guess, can I just thank everyone, first of all, today, in particular, Peter and Lung, for helping us to coordinate this event, but as well to our 3 guests, Kimberly and Crystal and Peter, for joining us as well and really giving a business perspective on what you guys have encountered firsthand. It's a challenging time for everyone, and I sincerely appreciate the time that you've all taken to be here with us today and to share so much with the industry about your personal experiences. So thank you all. And thanks everyone for being on the line, and we will come back to you with these answers as quickly as we can. Again, thanks everyone and have a great day now.